Everything costs too damn much. First, it was the pandemic's fault. Now it's big meat. That's why I said big meat. Who knew? Biden's White House blaming the soaring cost of meat on the greed of producers. Hold that thought as the administration presides over an inflation-bloated economy not seen in 40 years.
The president, the secretary of agriculture have both spoken to what we've seen as the greed of meat conglomerates. That is an area where people go to the grocery store and they're trying to buy a pound of meat, 2 pounds of meat, 10 pounds of meat. The prices are higher. That is, in his view, and the view of our Secretary of Agriculture, because of, you could call it corporate greed short.
Corporate greed and big meat. So who was your boogeyman when you were running successfully for DA? Like, how did you portray the Democratic rival?
I always portrayed the rival as someone who was soft on crime. But, you know, it really wasn't about them. No, it really was about,
light on me.
It was about how strong I was, my record, what I did. I didn't really spend a lot of time trashing them.
And yet politics aren't that now. It's not emphasizing the
Totally
positive. It
different.
seems to be emphasizing the negative.
But can I talk about this?
Go ahead.
I was like, I should have studied Janit's career. That would have been better for this segment.
No, but here's the bottom line. They're always looking for an excuse.
Yeah.
He doesn't want to admit that it's him, that it's his policies.
That's
that
politics.
What? That's Buck?
That's politics.
That's not politics.
You
That's
always
the truth.
blame the other guy.
No. We've got $3,500 that the average American family has to pay this year just to survive compared to last year. Last year was a really bad year. You know, the pandemic and everything else hit. But with Joe Biden in there, he keeps putting money into the stimulus, into the, infrastructure, this and that and the other thing, his so-called Biden bipartisan infrastructure. And the bottom line is that with inflation, that's the highest it's been in 40 years, and we're at, 6.9%? And he keeps wanting to pour more money in, and that means your money's worth less because there's a lot more of it.
But I want to stick with political stereotyping, Dana, and the Reagan administration. Remember welfare queens? He portrayed a whole class of people who became the enemy of Republican voters in a very succinct way by focusing on one purported welfare queen, and the story didn't even pan out, but it was very effective politically. That's what you do to your rival. Don't you define your rival, in this case, big meat? Big meat is something people can remember.
But they're making up a rival, right? So, like, big meat is not their rival. Right, the rival are the Republicans, but it's also the fact just that they have 69% of people in the ABC poll saying that they are disapprove of the way the Biden administration is handling inflation. That's a huge wake-up call. What else could you get 69% of Americans to agree on today? They agree on that. So what happened? So a progressive group puts out a poll-tested messaging and says, here's what you do to fight back. You just blame all of the private sector for being greedy. And they tried it with the energy companies. Now they're trying it with meat. Now, I'm not saying that there isn't a problem, especially when it comes to the producers, like the cattle ranchers. That is a problem, I do think, and that's one of the things that both the Trump administration and the Biden administration are looking into. But when it comes to consumer prices, all these other things fall into it. You got to get the cows to market. You got to get the trucks fueled. All of that stuff adds up. Packaging is more expensive. The supply chain, all of that happens. But if you ever wondered how the Democrats all get on one page, on the same page, and they're all singing from the same song sheet, it's because you have a poll-tested thing that goes out and says, greed, that's it, let's talk about greed.
So every morning, today's headline was
my
big
last
meat.
thing is that their problem is, initially they said inflation wasn't happening. Then they said it's transitory/temporary. Then they're saying, well, it's going to get better right after the first of the year. Now they're saying, actually, it's the greedy meat packers.
It's so funny how the issue has to hit exactly right for it to be the economy. So it has to be the economy at that moment. Yeah. I mean, for it to be the pandemic, whatever, it has to be. And it just seems it's such a roll of the dice to the last day of the election. Do politicians ever take responsibility?
No, if you're a good one,
you take responsibility.
You did, but you're a judge. And if you're a politician,
I was a DA too.
Okay, true. Well, you know what? You're perfect. As Nancy Pelosi.
Yeah, that makes you and me perfect at this table.
The perfect couple.
Not a couple.
Okay. Dana said something, and she's right. The guy at the supermarket, Geraldo, with the little gun, the price gun, he shoots it on the meat there. He gets a note from Big Meat every week with the price of the steak's going to be. What do you think that price comes from? You got increased transportation costs, labor costs, packaging costs, fuel costs, energy costs. It's all expensive. So Big Meat's carrying a lot of costs, so they're going to raise prices. You don't get to become Big Meat by selling meat for free, Geraldo.
Oh, I get that.
If you sell meat for free, you become little meat. And you don't want to be little meat.
Do you have that graph, that funky graph on how the price of gas has really plummeted?
What, 10 cents?
Look at that.
Well,
It looks
so,
very
Geraldo,
dramatic.
Geraldo, that's not dramatic. That's 10 cents.
No, but
That's
that's
ten
my point. Wait a second. I'm the impresario of this segment.
Okay.
Yes.
Put the graph back, please. It looks like there's been a dramatic drop in the price of gasoline.
Right.
But as my young colleague points out, that's only 10 cents. They've squashed the vertical to make that graph look like the price of gas is plummeting.
Yeah, it's a slick sales
Now, did you
job.
learn a little something?
I
there?
already knew it, but now the audience knows how
What?
slick the Democrats are.
Yeah.
It went down 10 cents in 2 weeks, Geraldo. Is that because big oil is less greedy? No, because
they went to
Omicron
church.
has all the oil traders bidding the price
And by the way,
down.
with big meat, I don't like the idea that John Dutton from Yellowstone is raising prices like that. It doesn't fit in my head.
Yeah.
It just doesn't fit.
I have not seen
You should not
Yellowstone, but
say
I would
big
say
meat.
this. Meat is not even the biggest problem. It looks like used cars is up 31%.
Yes.
Gas is up 58%. Meat is at 13%.
Right.
Then you got furniture followed right behind that, jewelry, electricity.
They say that
So it affects everybody. As you mentioned before, $3,500 per family. I get it. So what you do is, you don't have to have all the answers, but you have to try. And the minute, I think you just diminish your argument when you set up somebody as the fall guy. In this case, it's corporations, big meat. Then we tried corporations, big oil. And you don't have to create an enemy. The other thing is, and no offense, but the press secretary should not be answering complex economic problems. Have the Treasury Secretary out there.
No, that's
the
a
Labor
problem.
Secretary out there.
Can I tell you something
This way
how
you
that
don't get
works?
big meat statements that people mock for 24 hours. I would like to have an expert that knows more than the reporters out in front.
So
Why not?
let me tell you what happens. When the economy is good and you have good news, you can find anybody from the Treasury Department
They
to
don't
come
wanna
over and
go.
do the briefing. As soon as it's tough, they're busy. They can't show up. Let me tell you something that happened the fall of 2008. And I was learning what a credit default swap was every single day.
But I'm sure you signaled to the press corps, didn't you, what the story of the day was? I remember when Jimmy Carter was president, and I was in Latin America covering his trip to South America, and somebody ran through the hallways at 4 a.m. The story is Amy Carter. The story is Amy Carter. So everybody wrote about Amy Carter that day. It's just the press can be easily steered to cover the big meat angle.
Not anymore.
Geraldo, you say big meat over and over. It doesn't make your meat bigger.